welcome to technical session 14, if I can get the words out. Technical session 14, we're going to be talking about custom configurations because unfortunately there is no one-size-fits-all solution to computing. People have different needs, different requirements. Some things are extra and it doesn't really make sense to have them in there for us. Some things we need a lot more of because, we're trying to do far more than the average computer can handle. So we need to make adjustments as to the components we utilize within our systems in order to meet those needs, be it personal or at an enterprise level at a company. So for that, we're going to be talking about custom configurations. We're going to be able to describe different configurations that meet common client needs. So we're going to be kind of, grouping these into little silos, kind of like we do everything. There's no way you can really go over every custom configuration. We'd be here for 6 months just going over those, and it makes no sense to get into that nuanced of a discussion. So we'll talk about the general silos with regards to custom configurations. We're going to be describing some of these features, characteristics for different custom workstations, and given certain scenarios, be able to select the appropriate components for a custom PC configuration to meet the customer's specific needs. And when we do things like that, we have to be under the assumption that resources are limited. So we're going to be taking the approach of what are the most important components. Certain things like RAM, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, the maximum RAM you can install is always the best option. No, under limited resources, if we have to choose between components, RAM may not be the best option. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here this afternoon. BSMs we want to keep in mind: communication, being able to quickly and concisely convey your message to your teammates, understanding that we are going to be using different language and vocabulary skills when we're dealing with customers, when we're dealing with teammates, and we're dealing with supervisors. There's some books as we have something like 10 languages, depending on who we talk to. We use different words, tones, syntax, body language, all that kind of fun stuff. And if you kind of pay attention to yourself, because we do this subconsciously, you'll notice that you use these different, settings, so to speak, for yourself as you speak to different people. We also want to maintain our growth mindset and continue to exercise those muscles and improve upon our current knowledge base. All right, specialized custom PCs. Specialized computing needs require specialized PCs to be able to accomplish the tasks that we wish to accomplish. As an IT professional, we should know how to build a PC. Some of us in this class have already gone through that exercise and done that. And we also want to be able to do this in an enterprise setting where we are building it to the needs of our specific customers. The three most common types you will generally come across is you have your workstation PCs, which would be where your operation employees tend to work on a daily basis. You have your media workstations, and then you have your specialized customer PCs or custom consumer PCs, like gaming PCs. First off, we want to start off with what is called the thick client. Thick client, it's your standard computer. You walk into Best Buy or Fry's or, what other store you want to go to, and you just pull that sucker right off the shelf. Standard PC. That is what is called a thick client. It accomplishes the majority of tasks for offices and home users, things like that. They tend to have sufficient core hardware to support whatever operating systems you're going to be using. They have your typical desktop applications such as Office. They're good for general productivity and network applications within the office as well. So that is your thick client, standard PC. That's basically just how you remember it. That's right off the shelf. Contrast that with the thin client. Thin client is going to be a much more stripped down version. It is designed to kind of outsource the majority of its work. A lot of times it's not even going to have the operating system on the actual machine. It will be working remotely, like it'll be working off of an operating system on a server rather than on the one in the actual PC unit itself. They may not even have hard drives internally. The BIOS just says, when you turn on, connect to this server, everything you need is there. Once it goes there, it boots up your desktop from there. And interestingly, it provides nice security, because if it's stolen, there's no data secured on it because you don't have hard drives. It's a stripped down version. They tend to serve as a single purpose. One of the most common examples you may see of these are point of sale machines. Like if you go to Walmart or Target or any big box store or grocery store or whatever, the cash registers are thin clients. So it is a stripped down PC with a very specific purpose, and likely it is communicating with a primary server, which is where it's getting its operating system and all of its other information. The only requirements you really need for a thin client is to have network connectivity so that it can access the networks and get the resources it needs from something else. So that's your primary requirement for a thin client, is network connectivity. So it would need to have a good NIC. Questions on thin clients? So we go back. Thick client, standard PC, right out of the box, like anybody would buy from the store. Thin client, strip it down a little bit, so it's a lot less expensive. We can make a bunch of these for relatively cheap. We set them up as workstations for our employees, and then they communicate with our primary servers to get the majority of their resources. Virtualization workstations, they are the other side of that thin client. So you have a virtualization machine, which essentially is enabled to run more than one operating system at a time. Rather than a single computer running a single operating system, you may have one in your server room that's running 20 operating systems, and you have 20 workstations that will connect to it and run their operating systems off of this virtualization workstation. And these virtualized workstations are called VMs. The guests are called VMs.
Kelly.
Yes.
So virtualization is like, what is it used? It's used for like when you have like, is it used for like thin clients that like are attached to a server like that, or?
That is one use for them.
Okay, because like I'm still not just on. I still don't really understand the purpose of virtualization.
Understood. So remember how we just said the thin clients have no operating system on them whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
So they have to go out to a server in order to utilize a workstation.
Yeah.
So you would have a virtualization workstation that would have multiple instances on it that would run an operating system. So you would connect to it, and though on your PC you would be seeing your desktop, that desktop is actually on the server.
Oh.
So you're connecting to that server, and that's where the operating system is.
I see, and
that's what that virtual machine is.
Okay. All right. That clears that up.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I said, so like if you have 20 workstations, 20 thin clients, they can all connect to a single server with 20 VMs or virtual machines on there, and each virtual machine would be dedicated to each of these thin clients.
Yeah, and then like it says here, it saves the cost when you're buying hardware, like when you're
correct.
So you're buying you can buy like thin clients in bulk and then just use virtualization.
Yeah, as long as you have a NIC card, it's able to contact the BIOS. The BIOS in the boot order says, hey, you're going to go to this web address to get your operating system. It goes over there, and then everything is done on the other system. Your system is essentially just a conduit to talk to the other one.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with the virtualization workstations, all the hardware and resources of that machine are shared amongst all the guests that are coming to operate on that PC, as well as the host machine. So as we were just talking about, Kevin, it saves on hardware costs because you're able to build thin clients much more inexpensively than a thick client. And you can use it for a variety of things. You can set it for working in a support environment. You could have it as, them doing all their work on remote machines rather than having all that software localized on these thin clients. You can use it to test different software and platforms. We will get into this when we talk about virtualization. This is just kind of your first peek at it. The most important things for your virtualization workstation is going to be maximum RAM, as much RAM as you can get, because for each operating system, you need to have at least the minimum RAM to run each one of those instances. And then you need a multi-core processor that's, because you need at least one core for each instance. Don't worry, we will have a little slide that will give you each of these custom configurations and what the most important things are on them. So there will be a slide for that. All right. So as we just talked about, maximum RAM and a fast CPU with multiple cores. That's your key components. If you don't have enough memory, obviously your operating system won't be able to boot. So that becomes a major issue, which is why you need to take that into account when creating each system. And then as many cores as you can get depending on the types of the number of VMs you need to create or virtual machines. All right. Graphics workstations. Anybody have dreams of working for Pixar? No, I didn't. I had friends that wanted to. So, engineers, I started out in engineering. CAD programs were all the rage at that point, the computer-aided design. We had to take multiple classes on this in our first year to become as proficient as we could with it. The things with it, though, there's also computer-aided manufacturing. The things with this, the problems, is it is very processing heavy. There is a lot of computations that go into play when you start doing 3D rendering and stuff like that, especially if you're doing 3D modeling of living structures, like buildings, bridges, all that stuff, because you have to take into account a lot of different variables. So the computing power is massive for this kind of stuff. And you also would use stuff like this for Photoshop, for special effects for movies, all that kind of stuff. So there is, a lot of different careers that would kind of fit into this one little niche. Yes, Kevin.
Is it possible to combine specific say you want a gaming computer, but you also want to you also do graphics and 3D modeling and stuff? Is it possible to do both? Have a computer that does both?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This is one of those under conditions of limited resources. If you're trying to make these things happen, these are the most important items. That's kind of what they're trying to get across here. But yeah, making multi-purpose machines, absolutely. So for graphics PCs, you would need solid state hard drives for the faster read and write mechanism. So you'd want faster solid state drives. You would want maximum RAM to check the parameters for the graphics software that you're using. High-end video cards with its own memory, processor, and display adapters. And then high-quality monitors for visualization purposes, especially if you're working on things like special effects or photography and stuff like that. You want extremely high-quality monitors to make sure you're getting the best possible results. All right. Audio editing workstations. They're very similar to their graphics workstation counterparts. The main difference is they need a high quality audio interface and powerful speakers as well. So an audio interface will provide multiple input output audio connectors or MIDI connections for microphones, speakers, and other instruments as well. So that's the main difference, is the high quality audio versus your graphics PC. Otherwise, they're pretty similar. All right, video editing workstation. Kind of combines the requirements from the audio and graphics workstations together. So video editing requires a very powerful CPU with as much RAM as you can get. You want to try to set up multiple hard drives, hopefully an RAID array, for the added storage capacity and the enhanced read and write speed. And then obviously you're going to want a second monitor. So while one is like you're rendering videos on one screen, you can still be continuing to work on the other. So it allows for greater functionality at the workstation itself. So this is for video editing workstations. Home server PC. So as we kind of move into more PCs are being used in the home environment, although I would argue more people are getting away from actual PCs, getting more towards laptops, tablets, and things like that. Although the tablet is actually starting to replace the laptop, even then for the most part, because they're starting to add some laptop functionality to tablets at this point. And if all you're using it for is kind of checking your email, surfing the internet, all that kind of stuff, you don't really necessarily need that heavy lifting power of a PC or a laptop for the most part. But in this particular instance, where you're setting up like a home server PC, these types of PCs are going to be serving predominantly three functions. Media streaming. So you don't want to store this media on every PC in the house. You can store it centralized on one, and then you can allow sharing to the other. So you have a primary multimedia machine, and then that can share to other devices in the house. We do that at our house, where I have a very large hard drive with all the multimedia of the house, and it's connected to all the TVs, and then the tablets and computers also have sharing capabilities. So if they want to watch anything from our movie catalog or music or what have you, they're basically just connecting to the primary server, which is my machine, and they're able to get what other files or information they need. File sharing, also a big part of it, so you can kind of have a centralized location where that's all kept. And then print sharing. Not so much a big deal nowadays with network printing, but if you have one that is connected to a hard line to a main computer, you can share that printer with the others. They can, if they need to print something, they send it to the main computer and it sends it onto the printer itself. So that is a home server PC where you have the most powerful unit in the house, operates kind of like a server, sharing resources with the rest of the household. Software-wise, pretty much any modern operating system will work: Windows, Linux, Apple, or Mac. Hardware needs primarily have to deal with your network speed and hard drive capacity. So if it's extremely active, you need more RAM, and the CPU could become important. But you do want that gigabit Ethernet NIC so that you can share those files rather quickly, especially if you're doing audio, video streaming, things like that. And if data redundancy is critical, you need to have duplicate hard drives or a RAID configuration at your house. Questions so far on this? I saw your hand up, Kevin.
No, the question was answered. I was going to say, would you require a RAID configuration to do this? And I didn't see the bottom of the slide yet.
Understood. It's not required, but you can do it. Like I don't have a RAID set up at my house. I actually have duplicate backups. So I have a primary backup that I'm very paranoid about my data. I have a 16 terabyte hard drive hooked up to my computer. I have one that is backed up here in the house that I back up once a week. And then I have a tertiary one that I keep off site in another location that I back up once a quarter. You know,
Okay.
I live in Florida. We have hurricanes.
Yeah.
Several years ago, 2 years in a row, we had hurricanes hit and drop a tree on my house. So twice in a row, 2 years in a row, I had trees fall on my house. So, you know, I like making sure I don't lose my stuff because I have irreplaceable data on my drives. So I keep 3 of them just out of abundance of caution.
All right,
Although when I was going through the cohort, interestingly, the day after we went over drives and we talked about the importance of data and backing it up, my main hard drive crashed and I lost everything on my main drive. And it was the day after we talked about it in class, which was kind of funny.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
Mm-hmm. All right, home theater. Near and dear to my heart, I love movies. So home theater system needs to be able to play music, watch movies, television, and optimize, you know, all of this stuff to give you the best experience possible when watching from your house. And interestingly, a lot of these home theater systems can have better sound and quality pictures than you can get in the movie theaters if you have the right setups. So you're going to want to have a primary monitor or a TV or a projector in your home theater, whatever your preference is. So a display medium, you're going to need surround sound speakers to get that full 360 audio experience. You're going to need a stereo receiver, a PC that would be dedicated for this, although you could technically use a home server. And then obviously really good network connectivity. And home theater PC, they do abbreviate it as HTPC. So that is one I would take note of. And they will mention, I think they have it put that way on the A+, as well as some of the questions in the test. So HTPC is home theater PC. So please take note of that. The gaming PC. Now, here's the misnomer on this one. So gaming, you know, casual gamers can get by on a regular thick client. If you start getting really intense in this stuff, a thick client, you'll outgrow that thick client really quick. And you'll probably want to build your own PC. So if you take their gaming seriously, some of these requirements fall into place. So you need that fast multi-core processor, right? You need a high-end video card to handle all the rendering and graphics that are going to come with that game. High definition sound, because you know, if we're playing games, especially, you know, like certain genres, like, you know, horror or first person shooter, you want that 360 sound to know where, you know, the things are coming from. And because we're going to be putting the CPU through its paces, we're going to need cooling capacity. So that usually means something like liquid cooling or something along those lines. So these are the typical upgrades. Can anybody remember from what I said earlier, why I scratched out a lot of RAM? Why did I negate that?
Video cards come with their own RAM?
Excellent, Melanie. Because the video cards themselves come with their own RAM. The majority of the RAM capacity is going to be used on that video card. Now, again, remember, we're speaking under terms of limited resources. RAM is not going to be your top priority. These other items are. Obviously, if we can afford more RAM and we want to put more RAM in there, we're going to do that. Because you can never have enough. You know, I want to have 75 windows open, 3 games running in the background and still be able to talk to you wonderful people on a daily basis. You know, can't always do that if I don't have enough RAM. So GPU obviously would be your highest, and then you would kind of work back from there. Questions, comments, concerns on this one? All right. So here's an example of a gaming PC. Yeah, it's a little older, but you know, still works pretty good. And you can kind of start to see what I was talking about, where I was saying people kind of go for an aesthetic look, you know, in the gaming PCs, because, you know, again, these are coming to be sort of like art pieces where people want to show them off and showcase their equipment and stuff like that. So we can see right here is the CPU, and we have these 2 tubes coming out of there. We know right away that is liquid cooling, because there's no fan there. There's just this little piece here, and it's going up to a radiator. So we have these 2 tubes where the liquid's going to be coming in and then back out as it heats up. Our wires, they're all the same color. They're not that red and yellow and black like they were before. So we're still going for that streamlined look. And then we have our GPU right here. I know it's not the most recent up-to-date one, but it was pretty good for the time this slide was made. So, and nowadays, a lot of this stuff would have LEDs on it, like RAM modules come with LEDs across the top of it. All the fans have, you know, colorful lights across them. You know, many of the tubes for the liquid cooling now are clear, and they use multicolored liquids through the cooling systems. Wires, they'll color them based upon whatever coloring scheme you're wanting to use for your system. There's tons and tons of options when you're building these PCs to kind of make it more personal to your style as well as your computing needs. So it's really, really kind of fascinating. I'll try to find a couple of videos where we can look and just see some really cool builds that people did and just give you an idea as to, you know, the capabilities. Here's some examples of some rather old PCs. You can kind of see the price tags on them. I wish they were still around this range right about now, but unfortunately, we are not even close. You probably can't even get a graphics card in this price range for the most part at this point. But, you know, it just kind of gives you a relative price point where you could get a standard PC, probably at this time, probably around the $800 to $1,000 range. Your gaming PCs were looking closer from the $1,600 to $2,000 range to start. They can go significantly up from there, depending on the bells and whistles you want to add along the way. All right, here's kind of a look at video cards. This is a little bit newer version than the ones we were showing you before. You can see them, they're fully encased now to kind of protect them a little bit, but they still have the fan openings for good air circulation. Our ports have been updated. They're no longer the DVI and VGA. Now we're looking more at HDMI and display ports. This is the slide you want to take a snapshot of. So this gives you a full breakdown as to what the most important pieces are for each configuration that we just kind of went over pretty quick. Get a little bit of a rundown. All right. And one other one we do need to be aware of, it's called the NAS, or Network Attached Storage. Not to be confused with storage as a network. That is a different item. Those are two slightly different things. So network attached storage contains its own little CPU and RAM. This may be a RAM or a RAID array that is connected to your network and allows everybody kind of to be able to access it and gain files off of it. It's kind of like a mini server. They're kind of inexpensive. You can set one of these up relatively inexpensively. The main thing you need on it is multiple hard drives or high capacity hard drives and gigabit Ethernet network. That's what you need. Those are your main components that should go into your network attached storage. Typically provides two primary functions: media streaming. So if you do a lot of movies or videos or what have you, music, you would store all of this on here, then everybody can go on and grab it from there. And also file sharing. It gives you a centralized place to locate all of your stuff. So that would be your NIC, or your NAS, network attached storage. So they did ask me about this one on the A+. I don't know about you, Rachel. No? Okay. And then Network Plus, they start talking about SANs, which are storage as a network, which is much bigger. All right. This one's quick and easy. Just, you know, we should now be able to describe different custom configurations to meet common client needs: our thick client, thin client, gaming PC, home theater PC, home server, graphics PC, video editing, audio editing. So we should be able to kind of run down that list, look at the requirements, and understand when they ask you what are the most important things. They're speaking of, under restricted resources, what are the most important things. You may have a scenario where you're given a certain amount of parts and you have 5 PCs to build or 3 PCs to build, and they'll say, I want 1 gaming PC, 1 thick client, and 1 thin client. Please give me what I need for this. Pardon me. So
I definitely had questions about that.
yeah, so they'll give you a few pieces and you have to use those pieces appropriately and build the correct number of PCs based on what they want. We should now also be able to describe the features and characteristics for different custom configuration workstations. We just talked about that. And given a scenario, select the appropriate components for a custom PC configuration to meet the customer specifications needs. And what it may be is some long drawn out thing where it's like, you know, Natalie works at some, company X, and she does a lot of work from home. She needs to buy a PC to be able to work remotely. And her son likes to do a lot of gaming on the weekends. What kind of upgrades should be made to these PCs? So it'll ask you scenarios like that. We have several of them in our quiz scenarios. They love asking questions like that. We will go over that several times, but like I said, this is one you definitely want to have in your study bank, especially that one slide that has your checkoffs for each type. And that is that.